Hello and welcome back to my weekly movie review show where I review a new film every single week. This week we're taking a look at the live-action remake of Disney's classic animated feature, Mulan. My apologies in advance if this video comes off a bit more ranty than usual. I've been a tad on edge lately on account of everything in the world just kind of sucking right now, and this movie is no exception. God, I hated this piece of shit. For some context, the original Mulan is what I'd consider to be the final entry of the Disney Renaissance in the 1990s that's just an absolutely fantastic film from top to bottom. It's a rousing, heartfelt, highly character-driven movie with a great sense of humor, a great soundtrack, and a great message of empowerment and self-actualization. Naturally, this remake, like virtually every other live-action Disney remake, just sucks every little drop of enjoyment out of the thing. Now, as some of you may recall, way back in the before time, in the long ago of 2019, I made a video outlining my feelings towards these Disney remakes in general, and while those feelings are largely negative, I did express some cautious optimism for this remake of Mulan. After all, on paper, this movie is doing a lot of what I'm looking for in one of these things. Rather than being a shot-for-shot remake of the original, this film opts instead to take a completely different approach to the source material by shifting from a family musical to an action-heavy, flying-wire martial arts film, while also excising many of the more cartoonish elements that might not work so well in live action. It's appropriate for the subject matter and delivers a different experience entirely than its predecessor. The thing is, this is a decidedly mediocre martial arts film. The choreography isn't particularly impressive compared to other examples from this genre, and the editing is so completely scattershot in places that a lot of the action is hard to decipher. For all that this film markets itself as a more grounded and realistic take on the material, there sure is a whole lot more magic nonsense in the Mulan remake than there was originally. We've got running up walls, animorphs, even the titular character has superpowers now. You see, as the opening narration of the film explains, this version of Mulan was born with a higher than average amount of midichlorians. I mean, chi, a spiritual life force which grants her fantastical superhuman martial arts abilities through pure intuition.
Her chi, the boundless energy of life itself.
Is it possible to learn this power from a Jedi?
Mulan's arc in the movie sees her learn to overcome expectations from her family and her society to suppress her latent chi abilities because women aren't supposed to use chi or something.
Could you tell her that only a son could wield chi?
This is such a rote, cliche, overplayed take on this character. It's way less interesting than the animated one. On top of that, the character is just no fun anymore. Mulan, previously one of the most quirky, expressive, charming Disney protagonists, has now been reduced to this boring, static character with barely any more personality than a bucket of paint. The new Mulan may not have a ton of emotional range, but boy howdy does she ever have mild stoicism down pat, and she's gonna play that puppy for all it's worth. You don't get much of an idea who or what she is other than just very good at fighting. Instead of Mulan being special because she's courageous, self-sacrificing, and hardworking, this version is special because she was born with an abnormally high power level, which lets her use the Force so she can perfect Ultra Instinct to punch and kick the bad guys betterer than anyone else can. I mean, yeah, this version of Mulan is courageous as well, but shit, I would be too if I was born with the natural ability to do this. Of course, what uninspired Star Wars ripoff would be complete without an older, evil version of the protagonist, who at one point quite literally busts out the line, "We're not so different, you and I."
We are the same, join me. We would take our place together.
Together, we can rule the galaxy as father and son.
Yawn. Then there's the other bad guy, essentially a stand-in for the original film's villain. He's not terribly interesting either, but there's a casual line of dialogue dropped about halfway through the film, which indicates one of the main reasons these guys are even invading China to begin with is that they're trying to take back their land, which was conquered by the Chinese Empire in a previous war.
For the land we lost to the Empire. For the shame of the last war. For my father who the Emperor killed.
I took this as an indication that perhaps this film was going to pull a Maleficent and have it turn out that the bad guys were never actually the real threat, especially once Emperor Jet Li here drops his sinister villain speech a little bit later on.
I will kill this Boricon like I killed his father.
with my own hands.
I mean, at the very least, I thought they must be building towards some sort of heroes and villains on both sides, war is just bad in general, and we should all get along, peace and love type things. But no, keeping in line with the Star Wars comparison, this movie basically ends with our scrappy band of heroes saving the day by finally crushing the rebel scum, thwarting their cowardly attempt on the Emperor's life, and securing his benevolent rule once again.
Like I killed his father with my own hands.
After all, it is a great honor and privilege to be ruled over by the glorious motherland. Don't take my word for it, though. Just ask several of this film's cast members.
Oh, bother.
But seriously, folks, there's a ton of reasons to save your hard-earned cash rather than spend it on this Mulan remake. So, as it turns out, owing to the global pandemic we're still in the midst of, it isn't actually safe to go to the movie theaters right now, despite what Christopher Nolan might think. Because of this, the Mulan remake has found itself in the position of being the first major blockbuster release previously intended for theaters, which is now instead being released digitally via Disney Plus, for a premium of $30 American. That's a hefty chunk of change, especially in the middle of a recession. Streaming this movie at home costs significantly more money than a full-price Blu-ray disc, and unlike a Blu-ray, you'll need to continue paying into Disney Plus's monthly fee to retain access in the long term. The price point is a little bit better in Canada, but this is still a ridiculous sum of money to be expected to pay for a single digital movie release on top of a monthly Disney Plus subscription. I understand the idea here is that for a family of 3 or 4 who would be taking their kids out to the movies, a $30 price point is negligible compared to what you'd likely end up spending on all the tickets, plus food, drinks, etc. But first of all, some of that money, at least nominally, is supposed to go towards upkeep of the facilities, paying the staff, you know, the movie theater experience. And finally, this is still a hugely exploitative, anti-consumer distribution model. I mean, seriously, they couldn't have even offered a reduced price to those who are already signed up with their service? Disney could have just as easily released this Mulan remake as like a $12, 24-hour pay-per-view for those who aren't Disney Plus subscribers and at a reduced price to those that are, and I'd be willing to bet they would still have made their money back, or at the very least taken such an insignificant loss as to make no difference. We're talking about one of the wealthiest, most profitable companies on the planet, to the point that there are serious, legitimate concerns over whether they're monopolizing the film industry. This company is the trendsetter for the industry and has been for over a decade, with a built-in audience of people who will drink in whatever swill they choose to put out and ask for seconds. If this pricing model works out and the Mulan remake ends up making a ton of money, it'll be setting a very uncomfortable new precedent for the price of streaming major blockbusters at home for the foreseeable future, further damaging the industry as a whole in the process. Luckily, it seems as though the public has not bitten down on this particular worm. Disney recently announced that starting in December, the movie will now be accessible to anyone with a Disney Plus account with no added premium. And I'll admit, that's a big step in the right direction. We're not out of the woods yet, though. If this pandemic continues to drag on, you can bet they'll inevitably try to roll out this predatory distribution model again, perhaps next time for a more enticing property like the MCU or Star Wars, something like that. As for this movie, look, I'm not going to pretend this is the worst Disney remake I've ever seen. It's not a completely incompetent film like, say, Dumbo or Lady and the Tramp, nor is it creatively bankrupt like Beauty and the Beast or The Lion King. It is, however, an aggressively mediocre film that doesn't hold a candle to the original in any way. That, coupled with the shady way it's being sold, makes this an extremely easy one to recommend skipping out on. Support it if you want to, but 10 years down the line, when you're being shaken down for $50 a pop to see the Disney Plus exclusive 5 minutes longer extended cut of Avengers 12, don't say I didn't warn you. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, hit the like button, subscribe, and do all the other stuff. Or don't, whatever. I'm a dad now! Isn't my daughter so cute? Channel update video soon, I promise.
Could you tell her that only a son could wield chi?